Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy Easter to everyone out there. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you live after the conclusion of the Bristol Dirt race here. A wild couple of days here, particularly this one, a race that NASCAR was absolutely determined to finish, no matter how many rain delays that there were going to be along the way there. But congratulations, unofficially, pending the post-race inspection, of course. Kyle Busch, your race winner, his first victory of the season, tying Richard Petty with his consecutive seasons mark. A tremendous reversal of fortune here, given how the rest of the race went. Kyle Busch seemed to have one of the best cars out there through most of the event, him and Daniel Suarez and others there. But coming down to a tight battle between Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe. Briscoe, having already won this season and punched his ticket into the playoffs after scoring the victory at Phoenix, was just starting to catch up to Reddick. Reddick had a heartbreaker of a loss back at Fontana earlier this year, 3 runner-up finishes, most recently at the Charlotte Roval last season, and also having just a complete just trying to just get that first win. I mean, even followed Austin Dillon home at Texas not too long ago as well. Was very good at the Busch Clash earlier this year before the transaxle failed. But once again, Tyler Reddick, unfortunately, will have to finish in second place. Kyle Busch making the pass just on the final home stretch there to the finish line, and by the narrowest of margins, Kyle Busch ending up pulling off the victory there. So tremendous race there. I have to say, generally, as much, I think there was a lot of aggravation that was coming into this race about the long-term viability of this event, given last year and given all the miserable problems they had with the rain last year. Even more torrential than we had in this particular race. We actually had a literal monsoon washing through the track. The campgrounds were soaked up, and it was kind of amazing that they were still able to piece things together and actually get both events in on a double header on a Monday last year. Thankfully, this time around, neither event was actually delayed to another day or postponed. They certainly were delayed, especially in the case of the Cup Series one here. But getting this event in, I know that there's still going to be plenty to discuss, certainly about the lack of, not being able to remove the windshields on the cars. Kyle Larson, among the drivers that was bringing that up as an issue. Kyle Busch himself, the winner of this event, said that dirt racing takes the sport backwards, agreed with Richard Petty in that same sentiment. So kind of interesting, I guess you could say, that he ends up pulling off this victory here. Happy to win anywhere, as he said in his post-race interview there. Kind of a bizarre set of circumstances there. A lot of comers and goers. A lot of drivers actually seem to have a real shot at actually pulling this one off. Austin Dillon looked excellent during all of this until he actually had the engine failure there towards the end. Ross Chastain was looking to be a top 5 contender before the engine let go, literally right after the rain delay. Kind of reminded me, Jerry Nadeau had that happen in the Coke 600 back in 2000. Would have won the race if the race was called at the halfway point there, but right after the rain ended and the race restarted, he blew the engine, and Matt Kenseth actually scored his first victory in that one. It's kind of unexpected for sure. Wouldn't expect him, but I guess after a Saturday race where the broadcasters talked about cookies so much, thus the motif for tonight's show, I guess it's only appropriate that the Crunchy Cookie car actually goes to victory lane in the Sunday race. I guess I do believe in divine humor, and perhaps the Almighty had a hand in things playing out exactly the way that it did in this case here. So I guess a lot that we have to go into. I mean, no shortage of it. We'll certainly talk about the Cup Series race as well as the Truck Series race. Also happy to talk about the broadcast problems number 3 that debuted this week. Glad to get some more content up here on this channel, so we'll certainly talk about that as well as other news and happenings here from the last few days. But before we get into that, let's look at more of the results here. Ty Dillon, I thought, had a absolute fantastic run. This is probably the best weekend we've seen out of Ty Dillon since his Dover race with Germain Racing, where he seemed to really have a shot at winning that one. This one, he was holding on to sixth place for pretty much looked like the most of stage one, was in and around the top 10 for most of it. And then that spin at the very end got him back into the 10th spot there at the finish. Michael McDowell with a great 9th place run. You know, he's had some good runs at Bristol when it's just the paved track here. Maybe not ones where he's contending for the win, but certainly a good run here out of him this time around, getting the 9th place finish here. Brad Keselowski looked like he was going to be in the top 5 before he dropped back a ways there. This is the team that actually finished last at Bristol last September with Ryan Newman, so a good turnaround for them, especially as Keselowski and the RFK team are still kind of getting their feet under them. We also look further back there. Daniel Suarez looked like he was once again going to have himself a shot at getting his first career victory at a track where just last year in the inaugural dirt race, he seemed like he was going to have a good shot at it there. But unfortunately, he's going to have to wait at least another week as he finishes in the 12th spot there. Cole Custer, a pole sitter, comes back from a early mud-related pit stop there at the very beginning of the race. He ends up finishing in the 13th spot. Justin Haley in 14th after what looked like a very convincing win in his heat race yesterday. That was really the best I've seen out of the 31 team since the Clash, when they had a fine run out there before that tangle with Kyle Larson that he had in that event. Chris Buescher rounding out the top 15. Looking further back here, congratulations to Josh Williams. I think it was outstanding to see him finish in the 25th spot there with all fenders on the car, at least as far as you can tell there. The longtime ARCA and now Xfinity Series driver working with BJ McLeod's team this year. I know that there was a lot of skepticism about that, especially given the fact that Williams in the 78 car on the Xfinity side has really been a struggle this year compared to how he'd been performing at Mario Gosselin's team. I thought he found a really good home there at Gosselin's effort. But I think the benefit of that is being able to have this opportunity to run a Cup Series race. And not only did he, of course, make the field, we had 36 cars for 40 spots, so there was no issue of him not making the show, certainly in a chartered entry as well. But yeah, getting a decent finish out of it, not being at the back of the field there and that. So kudos to Josh Williams, long time coming, and good to see him get a good run out of it. But at the other end of the field, though, it was kind of a very muddy and messy last place finish battle during this one. The Stewart-Haas racing cars seemed to just be attracting more mud than anybody else, with the exception of Chase Briscoe, who was actually leading at one of those points earlier in the event. Eric Almirola, Kevin Harvick, and Cole Custer both all having problems. In the case of both Almirola and Custer having to actually come down pit road and having issues of their own. They end up losing laps. Kevin Harvick was actually lapped on the track. He had dropped into the bottom 5 in the opening laps and was lapped on the track. There was Harvick raised this issue, certainly in his interview after he ultimately was eliminated in an accident that destroyed the right front suspension on his car. Harvick was expressing a lot of confusion as to why he did not get that lap back any sooner, or why he was put in that situation. But NASCAR, I think in that situation, was trying to find an equitable solution, even if it was something that was not necessarily in the rule book. It was really interesting. I hope that the radio communication was certainly saved somewhere, because the officials seemed like they were really trying to figure out a way to not punish Almirola, Custer, and perhaps even Harvick too much for having to have those early stops there that were dropping them further back in the lineup. They ultimately, when I was piecing it together for the article, and luckily the rain delays kind of allowed me to kind of revisit that, so hopefully it makes a bit more sense in the article. It looked like they gave Almirola the wave around. They still had Harvick a lap down, and they put Custer in a situation where he went from being 3 laps down, or almost 3 laps down, to being just 1 lap down on the same lap as Harvick. And this is the reason that the both of them were fighting so hard for the lucky dog, and ultimately had to shake Cody Ware out of the battle there as well to fight for that spot. But Harvick ends up still finishing in the bottom 5 there after that incident, the 34th spot. Denny Hamlin with an engine failure there, kind of reminiscent of the Busch Clash to an extent there as well. Eliminated in the early stages of the event. But Justin Allgaier, your last place finisher, his second straight last place finish, given that his most recent start in the Cup Series was last fall at Talladega, where, again, driving the number 77 with the Brandt sponsorship, he was involved in an accident in that race. That dropped him to last place in that event. This time around, finishes last here. This is a track and perhaps a series that I guess he's just really having a lot of struggles in. You think back to when he was the relief driver for Jimmy Johnson at Indianapolis when during the pandemic. Allgaier was involved in that pit road accident that dropped him into the bottom 5 as well. So, I mean, just a driver that I guess just, and every once in a while you have a driver like this that just seems to have a struggle one way or the other in the Cup Series, but unfortunately Allgaier ends up in the last place spot. But again, due to the bizarre rules with the timing and scoring, which again, I do agree with the consensus that Mike Joy did a great job actually explaining it. That basically, you know, when you had the ends of these stages, the scoring stopped and it wasn't going to start again until you actually had green flag racing at that point. In that particular case, Allgaier wrecked right before the end of the stage, and he was still listed as the last driver on the lead lap all the way until the race actually restarted, and only then was he dropped to the back of the field there. Not to mention the fact that, of course, there were other drivers that were lapped, so he wouldn't have dropped as far back in that case, too. But that was definitely a situation that thankfully wasn't as big of a controversy as it could have been. In the case of what, of course, happened at stage 2 with the earlier rainstorm that came through. Enough rain, in fact, that we had cars that were sliding down the banking and not able to actually maintain traction with the track. It really seemed like the race was going to end at that point. But of course, with the rules in place as they were, if it was going to cycle back to the way people finished at the end of stage 2 versus where they would line up if the race restarted, given the fact that everybody had made pit stops or everybody that was going to make pit stops had done so. You know, Joey Logano, for example, it was a difference between him restarting, getting a 7th place finish if the race ended at that point, or restarting the race in 2nd spot. Definitely confusions at that point. I think there was a good discussion there online about whether or not this was being explained very well. Dave Moody, it seemed like in particular, was kind of, for some reason, kind of getting in the middle of most of these debates about the subject. I think that it did bring to attention another issue with the broadcasts, and I guess this, you know, will eventually dovetail into that discussion, where there shouldn't be any difference between NASCAR's official timing and scoring and the one that NASCAR on Fox has, or any other networks has at the time. It seemed like Fox's leaderboard was having more of an issue with reconciling this particular rule change where you weren't going to have positions swapped until the race actually restarted. It seemed like it was trying to anticipate those changes beforehand, and I think that's where a lot of those debates were coming up there. But you know, kind of a bizarre situation there. I know it would have really changed the way that this race would be remembered if this race actually ended after stage 2, and you know they're going to celebrate Chase Briscoe as being the winner, even if he wasn't necessarily the first driver off of pit road. You know, it would have been kind of a mess at that point. I think that's probably more than anything why NASCAR was so determined to make sure this race actually was able to keep going in this situation too. But thankfully, I mean, a lot of that is, you know, it's all in the background now, and it's not as big of a factor there in the way that this race played out. So that's good to see. And also, of course, of the finish, the way that the race played out is certainly something that's going to get the most attention there. Been a while since we've seen something where the two leaders spin each other out. Kind of reminds you of Jeremy Clements trying to get it when he got his first win at Road America in the Xfinity Series, and him and Matt Tifft spinning out in the corner there. Luckily, in that case, they had a big enough advantage that nobody else was able to really overtake either of them. But certainly at the Bristol Dirt track, with however many cautions we were having, there was just no place to go. And if you had the slightest bit of a problem there, you know, Kyle Busch was a little bit further back there, but not so far back that he wasn't going to be in a position to potentially steal the victory. And of course, that was the case that he had. But I will say, I think that during the green flag racing of this race, what little of it seemed like we were getting, especially the final stretch of the race, I thought that was the strongest part of it. I think when the race was allowed to play out and you could actually see the drivers actually trying to kind of size each other up, I think that was what the race was at its best. It was actually kind of more frustrating when we had cautions, especially when a caution would just be a single car spin and it would take 7 or 8 laps to reset the field. I think that became kind of frustrating there. And then, of course, the rain added to that. But, of course, there's not a whole lot you could really do with that case. Yeah, it was interesting to see there. I guess the other thing to really talk about, too, bringing the booth back. I'm seeing a lot of guys already in the chat here talking about Daryl Waltrip being back in the booth. I think, certainly Waltrip, given the fact that it's been a couple years, even since his last broadcast at Sears Point back in 2019, I think it's, he's there as a guest. He's there as a guest broadcaster. Even when I did my broadcast, my criticism videos, I give a lot more latitude to the people that are in there as guest broadcasters because, they're not, the expectations are going to be different. Even for the case of Daryl Waltrip, where, of course, he had been a broadcaster for so many years with this group in the Fox booth, you certainly can't grade it as harshly as, the people that are there every week or the people that are on that there. I thought he did a decent job. I don't think he was a distraction. I don't think he was nearly as distracting as maybe some of his other broadcasts in the last couple of years where he was doing it every week. He seemed like he was fine. I was worried coming into this that him and Clint Boyer was going to be like way too much going on. I didn't really get too much of a sense of that. I felt that Daryl was kind of, he was kind of fitting in. He knew where he was in the equation of everything there. And I thought that worked out pretty well there. Certainly better than I think that Adam Alexander does with the driver broadcasts. And I certainly went into that in the video that was just posted this week. Yeah, I think that was a different one to look at there too. I do think that the camera work was still left a lot to be desired. I think it was very tricky to figure out what was happening in some cases. I'm glad they didn't do too many onboard shots for the battle between Reddick and Briscoe at the very least. I thought that part of the race was actually covered pretty well. There were other times even leading into that where they would just zoom in so closely to these cars going into the corners each time, and it was just getting absolutely absurd. I know there's some cool features where you want to see the flames come out the pipes and see who's shifting and who isn't and all that, and that's cool and everything. But it gets to a point there where you want to see as many cars as possible. They actually accidentally had a couple really good shots on the restarts where they were looking up the start finish line and you could see the whole field address the starter stands. You can see if somebody further back was lagging back a bit. I wish they would have used that a bit more often there, especially under the green flag runs. I think that would have really helped. But yeah, I think it's, and especially, yeah, Kyle, I see your comment there too. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of great side-by-side battles further back in the field there. Sometimes they would accidentally show it if it featured a driver that they were talking about earlier, like when somebody like Cole Custer had dropped back in the pack, or Kyle Busch or Ryan Blaney or one of those guys. They did a decent job showing some of that, but I think there's so much of that going on. It was a real struggle to really show as much of it as they could. It would have been better if they, again, those trick shots, like I talked about in the video, rather than doing like an onboard shot and holding it for like half a lap, try to actually jump through the field and show this battle or that battle. Obviously they do that whole thing with the yellow outline on the leaderboard to kind of clue them in as to where a good battle is. But, computer is not going to really, see something that's setting up really interesting. It's just a guidepost. It's just a tool. It's not going to be as effective as something that's going to actually show, like when you're actually looking at the track and seeing somebody close up on a pack of traffic, you may know that something's not happening yet, but something's about to happen. That's where actually, watching the track is I think preferable in that case. But, yeah, there was, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Talking about Briscoe shifting 5 times oak. Yeah, exactly. I mean, some things, again, this is where, things need to be kind of trimmed down a little bit, and maybe there's just entirely too much ridiculous, stuff going on there. So, yeah. Yes. And, Brian, yeah, I see your comment there as well. Yeah, exactly. The camera person gets the shot. The director makes a call about what goes on air. Exactly. Yes. To be clear, yeah, we're talking more about the director. The camera guys, they're being directed by the director to get what they can get. So yeah, again, the director prioritizing these zooms and so forth, and that is definitely what we're talking about. And that's what gets talked about in my video as well. The broadcast problems one. So we'll certainly talk about that too. But yeah, I didn't mind Daryl Waltrip in the booth. I thought he did a decent job in there. I didn't think it was a particular problem. I kind of compared it a lot more to when they have the Darlington throwback thing and they bring Ken Squire and Ed Jarrett out. And yeah, they're going to be a bit quieter. They're not going to be as quickly responsive to everything, but you just still get the nostalgia of, what they used to do, which is pretty cool. So I think that worked out fine in that case. My goodness, I didn't expect us to still have, we had about almost 80 people in here tonight. I figured after the race ran as late as it did, it would probably be a bit shorter of a group here. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I also, Beast of Metal, thank you for your super chat earlier too, man. My goodness. Let me make sure I get yours off here as well. Between the birds, Tennessee weather, the cold concrete that couldn't absorb rubber at Martinsville, and the mediocrity of Richmond, this short track swing showed one thing: NASCAR shouldn't be at these tracks before the last 2 weekends of April. That's certainly something to be discussed. I think that, obviously we've had some races that at some of these short tracks that maybe aren't the most exciting or maybe are too heavily plagued with weather. Obviously you also have the same window that you're dealing with in the fall, where that just as easily could happen in the second races that you have later on that season. But perhaps this car in particular, or maybe these tires or whatever else is going on, Martinsville, as you mentioned, Beast of Metal is certainly eye-opening in that case. You have races where if the track's not taking rubber, it's not going to put on as good of a race. You're going to put those in the middle of the season and maybe, have it be hotter and slicker, have the races just in the middle of the year. That would probably be a good way to do it. Certainly we've seen these cars already handle so well at the 1.5 mile or even larger tracks. If you kind of go back to front loading, what you had on the West Coast swing, where it had Fontana and you had Vegas and even Phoenix to a certain degree, even though that's, just a mile track. It seemed like they put on a good show there. So maybe that would be something they'd be less prone to, but it's still gonna be an experiment with this car. I think it's easy to forget that we're still pretty early in the year and we're still kind of figuring things out. We could very well have the same issue at Martinsville when we get back there this fall for the penultimate race, even with everything on the line for who's going to actually make the championship four. That could still very easily be a problem in that case. But hard to say. But I do think that, that maybe something that should be looked at, especially with sticking with this car and going forward, trying to have the short track races be more towards the middle of the year, the warmer part of the year. That could be something that could be looked at. Because the big tracks and even the road courses, I thought Coda was a perfectly fine race there. Maybe that's a good indicator that tracks like Sears Point would actually be good in the spring, or something to that nature. I don't know how they're going to shuffle all that. It's gonna be something that they're gonna have to figure out with the schedule next year and beyond, but definitely something to keep in mind. I think that should be in their notes based on how these races went. Between the Richmond, the Martinsville, and the Bristol race here. I think the Bristol race here with the rain, I mean, there's only so much you can do to prepare for that. I mean, you could easily just have a whole series of fall races. Wilkesboro used to have a lot of races that were, delayed by rain in one way or the other. And of course, I mentioned that fully knowing the news this week with that track as well, which we'll absolutely talk about as well. You would have some tracks that just seem snake bit with the rain, and then all of a sudden, just as easily, they'll go through several years without rain. Watkins Glen is another perfect example. There was a whole several years that their qualifying was rained out. But there is a difference between having an issue with just a time of the year in that region that they're more prone to rain versus a track where it's just not rubbering in very well. I think that, hopefully they learned something from this and apply it going forward. I don't think it's going to be a different tire compound, but maybe just, or maybe it would be if that's an easier solution than moving the dates around. But it seems like the schedule is just in more of a flex now than it's ever been. So who knows how that's going to shake out. Let's see here. Looking at, we mentioned Justin Allgaier, last place finisher on that. Kurt Busch in the 32nd spot. JJ Yaley, a real bummer for him. I want to definitely mention that, he was really, I thought he really had a shot at getting in the top 20. It seemed like, and even till the very late stages there. But that incident where Austin Dillon broke down, the two of them sideswiped. It looked like it was only going to be not that big of a deal. But unfortunately, it looks like that actually eliminated Yaley from the race. And the unofficial results there showing him in the 30th spot, just ahead of Dillon there, listed out with an accident. So a real bummer for him there too. Bubba Wallace had a good run going. He ends up back at the 28th spot there. It sounded like he had some engine issues. At least that was the report at one point. He ends up behind Noah Gragson, who suffered a lot of damage in that pileup there that eliminated Kevin Harvick from the race. How about Cody Ware? I was kind of surprised by that bit of a battle that he was having with Chase Elliott under caution right after Cody got the lap back. I don't know if we only got like a portion of what was actually happening between the two. Of course, Chase was certainly not too happy about it in that particular set of circumstances there. But I think at Bristol, in one way or the other, I mean, it brings out the anger in any driver out there. And whether you're racing for for the win or for just trying to get back on the lead lap, that was certainly the case back there. So and never doubt that a guy that's driving for Rick Ware Racing, whether it is like Cody Ware, JG Yaley, or the others, they're trying to get the very best run that they can get too. And maybe a great run for them would be a 15th place finish instead of a win, but that's still something they're going for. And perhaps we saw a little element of that. Although I think we didn't really get the full story on what was happening there. I would have loved to be there to interview him there afterwards to find out the rest of the story there. Todd Gilliland, I expected him to be further back in the lineup there after he had an incident out there. He ends up finishing in the 17th spot, actually just ahead of your Martinsville winner, William Byron. Corey LaJoie involved in a couple of incidents. He ends up in the 19th spot. So again, I mean, I think in this race, you almost have to kind of view it as a super speedway race in a sense, because you have just such unpredictable things that can happen there. But it's still good to see. And it was certainly hard fought for everybody that was out there. That was the longest 250 laps I think that Bristol has seen in quite some time. And certainly for an event of that magnitude on the dirt track there. But again, unofficially, pending the results of post-race inspection, Justin Allgaier, with his first last place finish of the 2022 season on the Cup Series side, does not have a last place finish in the Xfinity Series this year. Although looking at his statistics, it was interesting. He's been struggling on that side a bit. He was in the top 10 for the first 4 straight races, and last 4 races, I believe his best finish is 14th, with runs even worse than that in the last couple weeks. So hopefully this off week will allow him to kind of regroup going into Talladega next week, and the return of the Xfinity Series as part of the duo there with the Cup Series that weekend. So that'll be another one to certainly look at there too. All right. But yeah, no, definitely a lot to look at there at the same time. I saw our super chat here. Let me make sure I get that too. Ball So Hard Will 1994. Thank you so much for the super chat as well. I feel like the NASCAR gods only want Dale Jr. to be the last driver to win as the number 8 car. I was sad to see Richard Childress's face with the dissatisfaction. Yeah, I mean, again, that's a part of it, and I think the other thing I haven't really talked about in this so far, and was certainly evident in the broadcast, was the camaraderie there between Chase Briscoe and Tyler Reddick. I was reminded so much of Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven after their photo finish at Darlington in 2003. So much respect shown between those two drivers. It kind of gave me a feeling of, again, I think the sport is in really good hands. I think there's a lot of good competitors out there that maybe a lot of fans aren't, hadn't really followed that much or hadn't talked about that much. But certainly Briscoe and Reddick, I mean, they've had already their share of, bounces and scrapes. I mean, they were running against each other back at Phoenix when Briscoe actually did score his first win. And we're out there. I mean, Reddick's time will come. It was heartbreaking to see, him back at Fontana where he had such a good car, seemed like he was going to kind of cruise in the last stage, and then he had that incident with William Byron after the flat tire. I mean, just terrible deal there. I was actually standing by there when he was talking with some well-wishers there in the garage area after the race there, and he was keeping a positive attitude, and that's what you have to do. You got to just go from one race to the next and know that hey, we really had something for him, and we can build on it the next week. This is why sports psychology is such a big thing out there. You got guys out there that maybe get too negative on their own experiences, and they're not able to kind of get back up there. But I think that's good to see. I think that I personally think that Briscoe's a really good kid, and Reddick has been very outspoken as well. I think he's gained a lot of fans these last couple of years. It's good to see, and I think once Reddick does get his win, it's going to be really interesting to see these two racing each other just as hard as what we saw today. It's unfortunate that in this particular case, Reddick was unable to actually cash in with his first victory. But I'm sure that there's some solace in knowing that that's going to be coming. You never know how many opportunities you have. You don't want to let too many of them slip away. But I think that for those of you that are Reddick fans out there, I've been there before. I've been there before rooting for a driver that never seemed like he was going to actually pull off a victory. And it just makes it that much more satisfying when they do. It definitely adds to the story there. And you could say, hey, remember when that happened at the Bristol Dirt race? And then, of course, it makes it that much better. So that was good to see. And hey, in NASCAR, and fans always like a villain too. So Kyle Busch getting the win, now punching his ticket into the playoffs. After the difficult start to the year that the Gibbs team has had, I think that's going to be another thing to kind of look at there too. But yeah, I gotta say, I mean, generally speaking, I was very pleased with the race. It definitely ran a bit long, but for factors that NASCAR obviously couldn't do anything about, other than just calling the race earlier. And given the way the race played out, it's certainly for the best that they didn't. I mean, I'm sure Reddick probably doesn't feel that way, but he was going for it, and I think he knew, and certainly from his interview. I think it was very clear. If you don't want somebody coming up there and route you out of the way to win, well, don't let him get up there. You better keep that lead as best you can. I don't believe that there should be any more quarter for the leader than anybody else, especially since that's the spot that everybody is going for. That's the big difference there. So, and he knows that, and I think he's very mature at this very early stage in his Cup career. Of course, he's a champion in the Xfinity Series. He's no he knows how to reach victory lane. It's just a matter of him getting there at some point here in the near future. Yeah, plenty of booze there for Kyle Busch. Well, I mean, probably return to. I mean, he was right to mention he feels like Dale Earnhardt at that point. It definitely a bit of a return to normalcy there for him as well. But kind of a crazy deal there. But yeah, again, kudos to Kyle Busch. Pending post-race inspection, your race winner, and Justin Allgaier, your last place finisher. I hope you guys enjoyed the last place dirt statistics I threw in. I was kind of thinking about this last year for the dirt race. I think I had some of them on hand, but I kind of reorganized my statistics a little bit so I could have those on hand quicker. And of course, it ended up last place actually did end up changing hands quite a bit with the issues that the Stewart-Haas Racing trio there between Harvick, Almirola, and Custer had. It was fun to kind of bring those up at the same time. So I hope you guys like that. Now, so this brings us into the Truck Series race. And again, the reason all this is here. So now I did receive a good comment on this the other day. So again, for those of you who don't know, or didn't see the Truck Series race there, Kurt Busch, during the early phases of it, he was the driver analyst that was part of the group there with Vince Welch and Michael Waltrip. Apparently he had discussed like how the layers of dirt on the track was like a cookie. Like they basically had to make like, these different layers of surface to make sure that it worked, that it was all these different compositions. They had these graphics and they were kind of working with it. We saw the same graphics in the press releases earlier in the week to discuss the differences between the way this track worked this time versus what they learned last year. But The problem is with modern broadcasts, and we'll get into the broadcast video here kind of during this discussion as well. Whenever some food related idea comes up, it ends up being repeated over and over in the broadcast. And I think the most absurd part of it was certainly the part where Parker Kligerman, who was running second at the time for Charlie Henderson's team, very nearly could have pulled off the victory there, which would have been tremendous given the fact that that team is based, out of out of Abington, right? It's out of the same area that Morgan McClure's team was from back when they were in the Cup Series, which is literally just a hop across the state border there into Virginia from the Bristol track. So that's definitely their home race. When Kligerman's truck stalled, and I mentioned this other post earlier, and this person was very correct in pointing it out. Yeah, most of the time somebody stalls, the car, or in this case the truck, refires, and there's no problem to get lined back up. But until the truck actually does refire, you don't know that. It could be very easily a situation where the truck stalls and it could be a real problem. Look at what happened to Ross Chastain today. Obviously, he ended up knowing that it was more of a serious engine problem before that. But he was just out of the race. And, we've had other times like rain delays at Talladega. I remember Juan Montoya had this happen, I think it was 2013, where he was like in the top 5, top 10. Rain came out, they had to stop the field, and he was waiting to get going again, and he couldn't fire the engine again. I guess either rain got in there and shorted the system out or something. So that could have very easily happened in this case with Parker Kligerman. And the fact that he was the second place driver, I think, should have made that really something we're like, whoa, hang on, let's focus on this and see what's going on with that. And even if it did turn out to be resolved very quickly, I think that would have been fine. What I do believe they should not have done is then go off in the booth and start talking about cookies. This whole cookie thing. I honestly don't understand what the thinking was there. That you got the three of them in there. And they're like, "Ooh, I got this kind of cookie. I got this kind of cookie." I'm like, is like anybody else? Am I the only one that's seeing this? It's like, did they watch my video and then they like hijacked my stream? So now I'm the only one seeing this. And they're like, "Aha, we're doing this, and nobody else can see it but you." It almost felt like that. I'm like, this has got to be like a lucid dream, right? Like I'm still asleep, right? But then they jumped into this just ridiculous thing. And then even after that, they just kept saying cookie over and over again. I thought I was watching Rugrats, for Pete's sake. It was just getting so stupid. But it was great, but it was validating at the same time. As frustrating as it was, unlike the Atlanta broadcast, where I was like red in the face. I was absolutely beside myself, angry with how bad that broadcast was and how much they were just completely just letting everything just slide by. This one just made me laugh. I was just laughing my butt off. It actually brought tears. I was beside myself the other direction. I was like, this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I was talking about in that video. So I'll kind of have a departure here in the Truck Series discussion to talk about that. So, first of all, a big thanks to you guys for checking out the video there. NASCAR Broadcast Problems, episode 3. That ended up being a 44-minute monstrosity that was pretty much started when the Atlanta broadcast happened. It was originally going to be just a discussion of the Atlanta broadcast. And then I was going to maybe break that down to say, okay, maybe part of it will be on the director and what they're telling the cameraman to point the camera at, as you mentioned, Brian. So very, very important distinction between the cameraman and the director in this case. And also separate from that, the broadcaster's role in it and the play-by-play and the quality of it, which was emphasized in episodes 1 and 2. My thinking was to make several more short videos, maybe not having narrations, make it just like the first 2 were. But the more I chewed it over, it's like, okay, this all needs to be in like one big thing. Because the more I was looking on YouTube, there were several videos that were talking about issues with the broadcasts, but it was in a very nebulous sense. I think people were kind of discussing it in one aspect or another. Maybe they're just saying if their concern was the commercials, if their concern was the camera work, if the director, again to be clear, or the issue was the play-by-play, if it's comparing Rick Allen versus Vince Welch versus Adam Alexander. It seemed like each one was like 2 individuals. So I wanted to kind of lump all that together and really make a good case. Now, you'll notice from a lot of the content that I put on this channel, I'm not very big on like I like to if I'm going to do something that's an argument, that I'm going to actually like, present evidence and say like, okay, this is my argument. This is what I'm seeing. This is why it's good or bad. And here's proof from it. I have a harder time doing that. That doesn't come as quickly to me. What I like doing is I like, assembling more of a detail, like presenting a chronology of events. And that's what, a lot of my videos are. If it's like Rise of the Field fillers, even 3 before February, very much the same kind of style. And I could make an argument from that chronology. I could say, okay, well, this chronology brings forward, certain controversies. Certainly 3 before February was like that. But in this case, I found myself revising it and adding this and adding that. And then you'll notice like stuff from the Richmond races in there and stuff from the Martinsville races in there. And I'm sure if I was still working on it this week, a lot of stuff from the Truck Series race would have been in there too. But what I wanted to do is create something that was going to sum that up as tightly as possible and just say like, look, this is what needs to happen. This is what absolutely needs to be discussed. And I think there's been a great discussion. I've been very pleased with the discussion in the comment section on that video. If you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. And definitely share the link with whoever that would be interested in it. And I hope that it keeps that discussion out there. I'm hearing a lot of interesting theories about it too. And one of them actually, was one I kind of chewed on a little bit, that maybe the reason that the broadcast quality, especially with the play-by-play, has been kind of downhill has been a result of what happened during the pandemic, where you had a situation where they were doing remote broadcasts, that they were paring it down to just very essential employees, the fewest people and all that. But it didn't explain much older examples before that, like 2019 or sooner or earlier, where they had the same issue. There were older broadcasts that had the same problem, or similar issues there. You had to look much further back for good play-by-play from Rick Allen, like back to 2008, or for Adam Alexander to 2010. Whereas the modern trend has been much more to this very kind of flat delivery, or just disorganized in that case. So I felt that in this video, it was very important to just put it out there. This is probably what I should have done years ago, absolutely years ago with this. My thought, I've tried to just make it funny, like I did with the terrible broadcast videos. I tried to just present it and show like, look, here's a difference. Here's this versus this. Like I did with the thing with the split screen, with the old footage and the new footage. I've tried all these different, I've written articles about it. I think I even mentioned it in some of my starting grid videos, even further back. There were things that I joked about, where there was like Daryl Waltrip bringing up Spider-Man all the time, like during that one Daytona broadcast. But I felt that in this one, it's like, look, I'm going to have to just say it. And every time that I get in that situation, I always think that I'm going too far, that it's like, okay, well, now, clearly, if, Rick Allen or Adam Alexander or Vince Welch see that, they're not going to be happy. And clearly that's going to be the case. Nobody, especially if you're, a high profile person, you're not going to be, wanting to hear, criticism, especially from some guy with, X number of subscribers. But at the same time, that's why I tried to balance it with the good versus the bad. It's like, look, I know that in each one of their cases, they're capable of doing really good coverage. They're capable of doing it. We see it even, some of them, they're just really good pit reporters, and they're just not very good play-by-play people. We've seen other examples of that too. But I do think there's something that still needs to be learned from it. And I would hate for the art of a play-by-play, to be lost, because I'm so disappointed that the common trajectory is to just ignore the TV broadcast and just listen to the radio broadcast. I think that's the worst possible thing. I think if you get to that point, that's showing that, that we're talking about the same problem. We just have different solutions. It's that we're both bothered by the quality of the TV broadcast, that it's not, able to be listened to. So, in that case, it should be able to be improved. I still maintain that Mike Joy is easily the best of the group. I thought tonight, even given how long this race was and all these delays, he was just as engaged as ever. He was just as engaged at the end of that as he was at the beginning of it, and he was juggling everything else in there. That's professionalism. Professionalism is, you are able to just perform at the same level, or at least give the impression that you are. Like, you may not be feeling it all the time, but if you're able to just put it out there, it's like, look, this is what I do. I'm just going to go out there and just do it. He's able to do that, and that's incredible. And maybe that's just a really rare thing to find these days. But I think it needs to be recognized as such. So that was another thing I wanted to put in the video too, is just showing that, Mike Joy is just in a different league from these other ones. I hear people, especially people that are big fans of Adam Alexander, are very defensive, I sense, about his play-by-play, and perhaps just think that, oh, well, no, Adam's fine. It's like, no, he's not. Adam, I think, is the most frustrating, and I actually clipped this out from the video. I was going to say, look, I think he's probably the closest to Mike Joy versus Rick Allen or Vince Welch. I think he's like right almost up there, because he does know what he's talking about. I think he does very good driver and team profiles. I think that's a consequence of him doing the weekly show, the show he does on NASCAR America. I don't watch those shows generally, but I know that in those it's a lot of driver profiles, Race Hub, or all those other ones. I think that helps him, and I think that helps inform his broadcasting ability. But I do think when it comes to the play-by-play, he just he's way too relaxed. He's way too casual, and I think that may be the effect of having to do the driver broadcast, because you're talking with these other drivers, and they're not professional broadcasters, so you kind of come down to that level. But you got to stay up here. Somebody's got to be in charge. That's the thing that, I kind of danced around a bit, even in this video, is that the main play-by-play guy, that is a leadership role. You dictate a lot of what, everybody's experiencing. Even compared with the director, even if the director is doing the storylines and picking the camera angles, the play-by-play guy has a massive influence on it, because you don't see the director, but you hear the play-by-play guy, and that's just a key point. I think even the end of this Bristol race, for those of you longtime fans, the end of that, where the cameraman, or the director rather, couldn't point the camera to the right car when Kyle Busch was coming across the line. How many of you were thinking about the 1979 Daytona 500, where Ken Squire is in the booth, literally directing the director to say, "Hey, the leaders are in 3 and 4. Stop looking." Just saying the leaders are in turn 3 and 4, where the camera, the cameras keep pointing at the start finish line. It's like, no, back here. And eventually they cut there, and you had that great footage there. Unfortunately in this case, it seemed like it was really tricky for them to get that together. It just, things need to be more nimble. Things need to be more responsive that way. And being invested in what's actually happening in these broadcasts, I do believe is a big part of that. So I will say this, I felt a massive just load off my back getting that posted this week. It's been such a huge relief, because it's been much like the JD book. The JD book was like that too, where it's something I've been thinking about doing something with, and I just sit on it for years, literally years. Like, I did those broadcast comparisons in 2013. I did the terrible broadcasts back as, I think, 2019, as far back as that goes. That was just kind of in the back of my mind. It's like, look, I need to do something with this, or it's just going to tear me up, or it's going to just completely distract me from other stuff I want to work on. And there's tons of stuff I still want to work on here too. I got some other stuff I'm very excited to get back going here pretty soon too. But yeah, I think that was kind of a big part of it there. And again, I'm very pleased with the response to it. Second to until lap 11, this was a video I was a bit nervous about posting, in terms of the content on there, because I'm not used to being this blunt. I try to really put myself in a position of, like, if I was brought in by one of these networks and say, like, look, I like what you're doing with this, but we could probably be doing this, and we should probably be doing that, and then, this isn't really working here. How about we do this? Like, trying to view it in that sense. Like, if I was going to do this as a presentation, that would be kind of the angle. And also, I mean, having some fun with it along the way too. The Simpsons clip came across there, and we were watching that episode. It's like, wow, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But I think it was a perfect example of, knowing that, look, I'm not saying that all the broadcasters need to be in there shouting over the top of each other. And I think that's where NBC, came in there. There may be a future episode that just focuses on NBC. They were still mentioned in this episode, but not emphasized as much. I think the Atlanta race was just so flagrant of an example that it deserved to be basically half the video's running time. But that was kind of the approach. And I think people understood that. And I'm very pleased with the response to it, because that tells me that I'm making myself clear. And that's a good indicator for me, because then I know what kind of content is going to, I'm not just looking to just get clicks here. I want to actually make sure that if it's something that I know about or something I'm passionate about, I want to make sure that I'm making myself clear what I expect to convey, what I expect to make understandable for everybody. And I feel like this one's getting closer to that. I'll probably come up with something else further down the line. But I don't want to give people the impression that this is the direction of the channel, because it really isn't. I actually have a much larger project that I'm just biting my tongue about actually announcing, that I've been keeping going while I've been trying to get these interviews done for the field fillers and the standalone video I'm working on. It's just taken forever to get those done. Because those scripts, they're pretty much ready to record. I just want to get an actual interview in there and make sure I don't have to correct a script afterwards. I could probably get those done right now, but I don't want to have to do a correction video and say, oh, wait a minute, I did an interview and I found out this stuff is incorrect. I don't want to have to do that. So I'm working on this other project that's not going to need interviews, and I think it's going to be more than enough to tide people over. Look forward to more announcements on that in the near future here. I saw a couple of super chats come in here. Thank you so much, everyone, on that. They're always appreciated, but they're not expected. But I absolutely appreciate them for sure. First off here was What If Racing. Thank you for the super chat there. The trucks going to commercial with 14 to go at Bristol was really frustrating. Exactly. I didn't really talk about commercials that much in the video. But yeah, that's a big part of it. I think that sometimes the networks, they create their own kind of just, I think there was a clip I played from Kentucky, the inaugural Kentucky race, and Adam Alexander, I believe, was the main play-by-play guy. And they just said, hey, caution's out. They're on pit road. We'll be back after a break. And then they will right back to a break. And that's it. You don't see what the caution was or anything. It gets to be just ridiculous. But a lot of people don't notice it until you actually break it down, until you actually show these comparisons. I think that's kind of a different thing to kind of look at there. So that's another one there too. But yeah, I think that was definitely frustrating, especially how close to the finish. I mean, laps at Bristol, whether it's a dirt track or not, they go by really quickly. And we were actually having a decent race there at the finish of that, just like any of these other races there too. So it's disappointing to show. I mean, I think that just shows how there's not that engagement. If the announcers were engaged, they're not going to be focused on like, okay, how much more time until we go to commercial? It's like, no. I want to see what's happening. I want to call what's happening. And hey, something big might happen. And then, okay, yeah, if a caution comes out, then yeah, perfect. You can go to commercial, and most people aren't going to care. But that's kind of a different attitude there. But I agree. I think, and there were a lot of people that were pointing out that caution for sure, or that commercial break for sure. And I definitely agree that was pretty egregious. I think it was. Ball So Hard Will, thank you again for the super chat there. What's your next big documentary? Also, how do you feel about the drone flying erratically? Personally, I think it's lame. If you watch the 2022 Clash, I think as to the second half of that with the drone flying, I think the only good broadcast that used the drone so far was Sears Point last year. And I admit I'm biased because I love that track and that's my home track and everything. But I think in terms of like following the cars through the carousel and actually showing the speed and everything, I thought that was the only race where that worked out really well. I think in a place like the Clash, I agree. I think that would be a real problem because the track's so small. The Clash was the first race I've ever been to where I would think, okay, the best view I'm ever going to have is going to be up in the press box. I usually don't like being in the press box because I like being in the garage area. I want to go down to the garage. I want to see if a driver is going to the garage area and working on their car. I want to know what's happening. But obviously the Clash, that wasn't an option. You couldn't go in and out of the infield. And that infield, when I did go down there after the race, it was tiny. I was constantly tripping over this and that and trying to stay out of people's way and all that, just from having, 23 cars sitting there in the infield. And Fox's cameraman and I think a couple other crew members and stuff were in there. It got crowded very quickly. So that wasn't workable. So the best view could have been just staying in the press box, listening to the scanner so you can pick up what's happening with the teams, and then just going to the haulers afterwards to kind of pick up things as they get in the cars back through the tunnel. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, and that's kind of what I'm planning on doing next season. But in this particular case, it was a bit different. But yeah, I think the drone footage there, I think that worked really well at Sears Point. Probably would work well at the other road courses where the track is so big and it's hard to set up these moves rather than having a standing position. I do like that NBC does the thing where they have the announcers scattered around the track. I do think that they still need to kind of polish that a little bit to get it closer to what ESPN had, where they're not shouting over the top of each other. Like, leave it to the person that's in that particular corner to cover what's happening rather than having everybody else clue in. Like, you saw the clip from the Indy Road Course in the main video. So that was like that too. My next big documentary, I'm going to still soft pedal what the actual topic of it is, because I want to make sure that people on my Patreon get that information first. But once I get them informed on that, I'm planning on doing that very soon. I'll be able to give you guys more information on that. So stay tuned. I think that's going to be another big project, and it's separate from Rise of the Field Fillers and my standalone driver videos, which I am planning on continuing as well. A lot of things up in the air, not to mention the Derek Cope book. I have some news on that front too. I have talked with some people about doing a new cover illustration for the book. So those of you that may have been a little bit about the cover illustration that I put together for Derek Cope Unheralded when I did the announcement last year, I'm with you. I just kind of put that together, and I have kind of more limited Photoshop skills, but I am working with a couple different people actually on getting a new cover illustration together, and I'm very excited about that because I think that's going to really tie things together. I also have another interview with Derek coming up later this month that I think will get to the point where I'll be able to submit this manuscript to an editor and get that done sooner too. It's just my inbox is getting smaller, but it's still a pretty big stack. But I'm very excited to go through a lot of this because I think when all these hit, it's going to be a lot of fun to discuss this, and I'm really excited to bring a lot of this to you guys. So I hope you guys are in for the long haul, because we're getting there. We're getting very close to that. And I hate to keep doing the George R.R. Martin thing here and just keep teasing it, but I like taking my time with a lot of these projects here, and I hope that once they are done, you'll definitely see the effect of that there at the same time. So yeah, stay Balso Hardwill. Yeah, stay tuned for that as well. Matt Wickelman, thank you so much for your super chat as well. I didn't see a message on there, but if you wanted me to read off something there, definitely let me know in the chat here. I'd be certainly happy to do as well. Section, let me make sure I read this right. Section 8 USMC. Oh, Marine Corps, right on. 53. Thank you for your service. If that's indeed what that initials there represents. I don't mind a little dead air on TV. I tire quickly of them talking just to talk, especially Boyer. I'm sure there's producers in their ears too. Yes, exactly. And that's a very, very good point. I think, what was it, on David Land's channel or one of these other ones, where there's a clip from the Indy 500 where there's no commentary at all. And it's just like a 2-car battle. And you're just sitting there and you're just watching it. You're just like, wow, this is fantastic. There's nothing else I can add to it. There are cases where broadcasters don't have to fill the air with every, with just words. I mean, it is better if it just plays out. Some things are just, or sometimes you just hear I think back to like when Tony Stewart was just laughing at the finish at the deal there too. I think that you had a situation there with what happened. I got sidetracked here. Oh, at Coda, when Tony Stewart was like just laughing at just like how crazy the racing was getting around the leaders. That's fine. Sometimes that's the only response you can have, and that's genuine. I think that genuineness is something that plays across. So yeah, the answer in some cases may be to really do a great play-by-play. The other case may just be to just sit there and let it happen. The 93 clip that plays in my video, they just play the audio of just the cars going by there for a moment before he busts in with a description for Jeff Gordon. That's fine. I think silence does have a factor here. I know tonight I'm filling the air with, plenty tonight, but I'm sure that translates as well on here, at the same time too. But yeah, I agree. And especially with Boyer, I think one thing that I was noticing for this broadcast, probably the one thing that did kind of irritate me a bit, is when they constantly grab the CB radio and they're trying to talk to these drivers in the cars. Why is it that it's always Clint that's the first guy that's talking? And it's always the same thing. It's like, wow, you're really out there. You're really doing the thing, aren't you? And it's like, oh gosh, we got to do this again. Like have something to say, or just, I still think that the talking to the driver in the car is something that, if anything, could just be cut from these broadcasts. That would probably be it. I think that's really kind of lost its luster because we have so much access to these drivers and we know so much about them and we follow them on social media and they do the victory lane. They don't do a victory lane interview. Now they're doing the interviews on the start finish line. We get as many fresh reactions as possible. Do we really need to do it while they're driving or while they're sitting in the car? I mean, I guess it's one thing if it's a red flag, like the thing with Briscoe and he's just sitting in the car and he's waiting for that. But I don't know. It's a different one there. It was Smith TV's upload of that. Okay. Yeah. That one too. Yeah. So I think that's another one to kind of look at the same time, but I don't know. That's a whole other ball of wax there too. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely silence would be another aspect to look at. Hard to represent it in the video, but I guess you could show, you could certainly show examples of it. I was almost tempted to kind of put in other examples of great play-by-play from other sports. There's a fantastic intro that I watch that was, I think it was a lead into a regular season game between Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal back in the 90s, and it's up on YouTube. And I always watch that, and I'm not a big basketball fan. Like, I don't hate it, but I've never followed it very closely. But I mean, it wonderfully describes all the storylines you need to know, and it gets you hyped for it. And like at the end of the video, I'm ready to watch it. Like I may have no inclination to watch the game, but it's at the end of that, I want to watch it. And that's such a lost art. Like, and I think that's the thing that a lot of these broadcasters need to strive for is like creating content, especially in the YouTube era, where you're going to want to watch it over and over again. I find today's broadcasts have like no rewatch value. Like once I've watched it live, like maybe I'll watch like a moment from it, like maybe something that happened, but even then it's very rare. It's very, very rare that I watch any of those. And I certainly don't think I'm alone on that. I think that that's not an uncommon situation. So, yeah, that's a whole other part of it there too. But yeah, that's also part of it. So yeah, so that's a big part of the broadcast. We talked about the cookie thing. We talked about that. Let's go in the Truck Series race itself. Another thing the broadcasters seemingly didn't want to talk about, which was very bizarre given that they like all the silly hats he wears all the time. Carson Hocevar, the race leader that wasn't. You would never have thought, if there wasn't a leaderboard on that screen, I would have never have thought that Carson Hocevar was actually in a very good position to win that, given that he led the only laps that Ben Rhodes did not lead in the entire distance. He was doing a fantastic job out there. Again, much like Tyler Reddick in the Cup race, his day is coming. I don't know when, but I think we're much closer to it than further away from it. I think we're at a point there where it's going to be something really interesting. Finished second again there. Ben Rhodes just had the faster truck at the end. Those Thor Sport trucks, you can't give them an inch because they will just bowl over the top of you. And there's just so many of them out there that if it's not Ben, it's going to be Matt. If it's not Matt, it'll be, I guess, Ty Majeski when he finally breaks through one of these days. And if it's not Ty, then I guess it'll be whoever's in the 98 at this point. If it's, I guess it's not, is it now Christian Eckes in that the whole time, or do they even have that anymore? It just seems like a quarter of the field is Thor Sport trucks, but obviously that's not the case. It's not nearly as many. Heck, even the 13 is a part-time effort now. Yeah, Eckes in the 98 truck. So yeah, I don't know, but at the other end of the field on that one, kind of an interesting last place battle because, as mentioned on the website as well as other sources, I think other people actually got the jump on this because I was still compiling my statistics at the time. The first ever Truck Series points race where the entire field finished under power. Probably shouldn't have been too surprising. It was a dirt track. We almost had this, I believe, at the most recent Eldora race before there was a pileup towards the end that Austin Hill was involved in. But we did have a race where nobody was able actually eliminated from the event. It made for a very dramatic last place battle where you're just waiting to see if somebody fell out. Thought for sure that Keith McGee was going to get last when he backed into the wall. Team managed to piece the truck back together, send him right back out. I guess at these dirt tracks, much like at your local dirt track, there's just so much latitude that you're given. When you have any damage suffered to your vehicle, you were able to just keep going. These things just take a licking and keep going. And it's not just a next-gen car thing. These trucks were able to do it even better than the next-gen cars did under the lights here. So that was interesting. Certainly humorous with the situation that led to Self's last place finish. His first since 2016 when he had the bumper locked there with Matt DiBenedetto. That I guess bumper bars just hooked. Ultimately looked like it was going to puncture the radiator. Somehow it did not. And Self actually finished the race 7 laps down. I mean, not that far behind, really, given that a lot of these short track races, you see guys that are 10 and 12 laps down on the pavement. On the dirt, it really narrows really tightens the field up quite a bit. And if you're having a lot of cautions, you're getting a lot of people getting their laps back anyway. So you had that situation. So it made for a really interesting feature. I kind of took the same approach that I did in the Busch Clash article, both for the truck race and then the Cup race article that you'll get later tonight. And focusing on the last place battles and the heat races, and then kind of fitting the last place finisher in the main event into all of it and tying it together there. I think that worked really well for the Clash. So I hopefully you guys are enjoying it for the articles on here as well. One guy that I was also heartbroken for, not just the situation there for Carson Hocevar, I have to say, Andrew Gordon, went through a lot to get that 49 truck even on the grid. The fact that he was entered for the G2G team, the chassis was still registered to CMI Motorsports, which has not entered any races this year. They ended up having to actually list it as a Cicerelli entry, get the number cobbled back together. He had a great run in his heat race, got into the field easily with the 49 truck, which I absolutely didn't expect. Put the temporary number on the nose of the truck as they had a bit of damage out there. I mean, just an absolute last car contender. I mean, it kind of reminded me so much of Jordan Anderson's truck that he had beat up out there at Eldora a couple of years ago when he got it back out there. But in this particular case, Gordon still had a fast truck. He was around the 27th spot in the main event when he spun out there and stalled the truck and lost all that time and never ultimately got it back. I thought that was a real heartbreaker there because I thought he was going to be a real great underdog story in this. I hope that at Knoxville they can get something worked out there where they can, first of all, work out the registration issue and hopefully still field it under Tim Veens and the G2G effort. But second of all, hopefully Andrew gets another good run out there and maybe get a top 15 out of it. I think he really had a legitimate shot of that in this race, especially with the teams that were struggling. Guys like Buddy Kofoid and Ty Majeski that got involved in accidents very late in the race. I thought that would have been really exciting to see. So kudos to Andrew Gordon there. No relation to Robbie or Jeff, but definitely an interesting driver to see get mentioned out there. On the other side of it, too, I was glad to see Dean Thompson get a good finish. I mean, he's the NASCAR Truck Series leader. Had that last place run with that weird fire in the cockpit there at Martinsville. He ends up with a 16th place finish. I think that's probably one of the best, if not the best, runs he's had this year. Chase Purdy was at the back of the field at the start. In the second Hattori entry, he ends up in the 13th spot, right behind Colby Howard. Great runs for them. But at the end of the other end of the field, on top of the fact that you had some teams that struggled in the main event, of course, you had two teams that didn't even make the race. Norm Benning, in his first attempt since we actually sponsored him at Phoenix last year in November, gets back out there, had Circle B Diecast as a sponsor. Yeah, the decals were a bit wonky on it, but it's Norm Benning's team. They make do with the best that they have. Norm seemed like he was trying to hold up traffic as best he could to kind of work his way in there, try to get the best run he could. Unfortunately, didn't make it in the show. Jessica Friesen as well. We saw Jessica race against her husband Stuart in the Knoxville race last year. Unfortunately, missed the show in the Bristol race here. They were your two DNQs there, but Austin Wayne Self, your last place finisher. I think it was 138 races since Austin Wayne Self is your last place finisher in the truck series there. So kind of a crazy situation on that end too. JD Land, thank you for the super chat there. Heads up on no issues in Cup Tech. Thank you for the heads up on that as well. We'll definitely read that off here. I guess the show's definitely already been running a bit longer. Thank you so much for staying tuned here. I know it's getting late on the East Coast here. We'll probably wrap this up here before too much longer because I don't want it's going to be early morning, I think, for everybody here, too. Yes, Bob Pockris posted 2 minutes ago. Tech is complete, no issues. Kyle Busch is the winner. So congratulations again to Kyle Busch. And yes, you are going to get another Justin Allgaier article later tonight when we get that posted here at the same time. So we'll always get that covered at the same time here. So hope you all have had a wonderful Easter here today. Certainly have over here at NASCAR headquarters here. Beautiful weather out here. Although we're supposed to get some rain later this week, but definitely a nice way to kind of catch up on things. Kind of surprising with the race being at night. I don't know how sustainable this is going to be for future seasons. I think that there was some interesting debate on that subject as well. Personally, I have kind of more of an issue with having the races on Mother's Day than I do with Easter. I think that I know that there you have obviously mothers and women that are involved in racing that are passionate about it. I don't mean to make any kind of statement about that or anything, but I think it would be nice to have it be kind of a separate deal from it. I mean, you always had races that were the night before Mother's Day, which I think is fine. They do that, but I don't know. But especially nowadays, where now that's the throwback weekend, and that's such a time to really geek out about the history of the sport, which is totally my thing. Love doing the throwback weekend when it was the Southern 500 weekend for those couple years out there. Yeah, that would be, that's when I feel more on the fence about. I guess on Easter, it's not too bad. It's definitely one that I identify more with the morning. I know you got football on Christmas and you got like other, you got, basketball on New Year's or whatever it is. I'm not going to pretend to know a whole lot about stick and ball sports, but, it's not unprecedented, I guess, but, I don't know what the ratings are going to be. It'll be interesting to find out this week, but yeah, that'll be, interesting there too. Yeah, we're going to do trivia questions here in a little bit as well. Hey, thank you, Oak32 Assassin. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, if you're definitely interested in checking out more shows, I usually start these about 15 minutes after the race finishes. So, except for the ones where I'm covering in person, the next one of those is not going to be until Sears Point in June. So, the next few weeks here, you'll certainly be getting more of these shows here in the meantime. We'll go ahead and go into our trivia segment here at the same time. And we'll do some questions. We'll bring out the late 1990s Tiger Electronics thing here. I'll mention which categories again are here, so you guys can mention in the chat which category you'd like me to do. Categories again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Categories once again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So go ahead and mention those in the chat. I got some other news stories I want to kind of brush up on here in the meantime while you guys are getting your votes in. Also, if you have any other questions about the race weekend that that I did not cover or anything that you definitely want me to talk about, definitely mention there at the same time. Yes, first of all, I want to mention my sincere condolences to the family of Randy Pemberton. Those persons certainly that I think maybe younger fans maybe aren't as aware of, but back in the day, he did a lot of great reporting for the Nashville network with Inside Winston Cup Racing. He actually did a great profile on JD McDuffie at the time of JD's passing. Was actually present for JD's best ever Cup finish at Fonda, New York. He was actually from that same region. And I remembered that very vividly and commemorated that at the same time. So that's definitely one I definitely wanted to mention. The Pemberton family, very big in the sport. Ryan Pemberton was actually Joe Nemechek's crew chief when he won the 2004 race at Kansas. Robin Pemberton, a big figure in Ford Motorsports. I believe worked with Penske for many years, and a big family out there. I know they're going through a lot there. So definitely condolences to the family and friends of Randy Pemberton there. On a similar note here, I mentioned JD McDuffie. I want to give a special shout out as well to Ed Peters, who contributed some amazing pictures from his personal collection that were posted at the JD McDuffie fan group, the JD McDuffie Racing Legend fan group on Facebook. If you haven't joined it yet, I highly recommend joining it. There's tremendous stories that still come in if you're interested from the JD book that I wrote. If you want to get other information on JD, I think there is hardly a better source at the moment. The Linda McDuffie, JD's daughter, and others have come together and really put together some incredible information. Ed just joined the group there recently and shared some pictures actually from Watkins Glen in 1991. He was actually the person who strapped JD into his seat in the car before that fateful run in the 1991 Bud at the Glen. He was wearing one of the LC Whitford hats, as was other members of the JD group there, and was part of that group there when the accident happened. He has some tremendous stories that he shared there. Definitely check that out if you haven't checked that out already at the same time. The return of North Wilkesboro, I know I just touched on that a bit earlier. Reports of them running on the dirt later this year. A track that many NASCAR legends raced on over the years. I know that this is a long time coming. Much more positive news than what we've heard out there. I'd always heard growing up that it's like, oh, well, gosh, they're never going to go back to Wilkesboro because there's so many tracks that are already in the Carolinas, and the plumbing is terrible. It's a mess. They're going to have to tear the whole thing up. They're going to put something else there. Well, apparently that's not going to be the case. So I am very excited to see that the track is apparently coming back. In what capacity it will, I would think that it's just going to be the local racing. I think it's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in the indication of having any of the top 3 series there. Not to say that it wouldn't be amazing. I think what may end up happening here is a Superstar Racing Experience is going to really make a big bid at getting back there and getting to a track with such clear NASCAR ties. If they're able to kind of land a race there before NASCAR does, I think that would be a huge get. It may also be a bargaining chip for getting NASCAR back out there, I would think. Maybe get a situation there where you get at least a Truck Series race out there. Who knows? There's a lot of openings in the truck schedule. I think that's certainly possible, given the fact that they're running at places like Knoxville and so forth. And yeah, if they're going through the trouble of a repave from this funding that they received that also went to Rockingham and to Charlotte, I would be very surprised if they don't at least try to get something with the Cup Series guys out there. Now, yeah, I mean, they're going to have to build larger grandstands and suites and all that stuff if they're going to try to do that. Well, yeah, probably. Not so much for the Truck Series. I mean, again, going over to Mosport, I was very surprised how simple the facilities there. I mean, there's a beautiful media center there, but a lot of the fan amenities there are very, very simple. You're just sitting on a hill out there. I almost kind of anticipate something similar for Wilkesboro, maybe even keeping those old seats that are out there. Yeah, ARCA would go out there, ARN, yep, same deal. I mean, that could be kind of a situation with that too. But very pleased. I would love to go out there and follow the last place battle at Wilkesboro. I think that track would actually have some good battles, given the fact that there has been such low attrition in a lot of those races. Last few races there, obviously we didn't have stage racing or these current cars or anything of that nature, but it was very hard for drivers to get knocked out of that race, even to the point where they would be running out of tires. I'm not sure if we would have a similar situation these days, but I would love to find out. So that's something that maybe kind of keep an eye on for the schedule in the near future. Something I didn't mention on the last week's show there, Akinori Ogata took his first stock car racing victory in a late model race over at the Hickory Speedway. I want to offer my congratulations to him as well. He's a driver that does pop up here and there in the Xfinity Series with Carl Long's team or Josh Realm's team in the Truck Series effort as well. So congratulations to him. I know that was a big accomplishment for him. It's a track where we've seen a lot of drivers come up through the ranks from any background. Raja Karuth, I believe, took a win out there just recently before he got up into the Xfinity Series just this past year. And then, of course, you think of the Jarrett family, you think of Sam Ard, you think of all the Xfinity races, Dick Trickle and other competitors racing there for many years. Hermie Sadler had some fine runs out there, as I mentioned in a Rise of the Field fillers. A long history with that track too. So it's good to see that track get mentioned as well in any context at the same time there too. Let's see. Talked about that. Another thing I think that could be really brought up from this Bristol race here today, kind of going back to the Cup Series race. There was a lot of grumbling about the length of NASCAR races, and we didn't really talk about that as much during the Martinsville race, although people were certainly thinking about it. I certainly sensed from the discussions there that week. I am a big advocate of just having the races be as long as possible. I think the mechanical issues that happened, the test of not just the drivers, but also the equipment, is a big part of the racing. It's not Formula One. It's not an hour and a half race with highly strung equipment that's on, qualifying setups or anything. I think that a team that is capable of putting together a car that's not only able to perform at a high level, but hold off these other competitors and do it for a longer distance, that's part of it. And you can have stage races. As much as I'm not a big fan of stage racing, you can still have the stages and have it go for a longer distance. I think in some cases the stages need to be reimagined a bit. I'm not a fan of splitting the Coke 600 into 4 even stages. I think that demystifies what a gauntlet that race is. I think when you get to like lap 276 without stages and realizing how much further you have to go, that's the kind of moments that really kind of emphasize, how much of a gauntlet that is. Do I think it needs to just be the crown jewel races? No. I do think that crown jewels are something you need to look at when it comes to paring down the length of the schedule as to how many races you're actually having or how many different tracks. I have much more of an issue, as I've always said, with these tracks that have multiple race dates. When you have other tracks like Watkins Glen or Sears Point that make do perfectly well with one date, I think that the trajectory of the sport is heading that direction. I think, starting that way would make the sport much easier for people to follow rather than say, oh yeah, I was at Pocono. I went to this race at Pocono. And it's like, oh no, there's another Pocono race coming up. Now, obviously today that's been fixed, but in the case of other tracks, that's not the case. So that's another thing to kind of look at there too. But yeah, I'm definitely on team long race. I think Sears Point should be a longer race. I think Watkins Glen should be a longer race. It's part of the challenge. If you want to do shorter races, we have plenty of outlets for that. We have short track racing. We have late model racing. We have shorter races in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series. The Cup races certainly shouldn't be shorter than the Xfinity or Truck races. That would just be ridiculous. I think that length is another test of it. It's supposed to be the ultimate elite level. Let's have it be the elite in each sense of having the toughest competition, the toughest cars to drive, and then the longest races. That's the other part of it. We saw a lot of that tonight. Look at all the mechanical issues that happened at the end of this one. Issues that wouldn't have sprung up if the race was even just down to the first 2 stages and that was it. That's part of one of the best parts of the racing. And I think that's something that would be something that would be lost there too. Oh yeah, Jeffrey. Yeah, I see you're falling asleep. I don't blame you, man. I can't believe there's still 70 people in here. Thank you so much again for those of you guys tuning in. Where are we with the trivia? For those of you guys who are waiting for trivia, let's get into that. Are we still? I see this here. Teams leads with 4. Let's see. Are we have anything else that's up there? I replaced the dirt race with the street race. That's a whole other discussion. I don't know about that, but we'll find out. Let's see here. 24 hours of Martinsville. We almost had 24 hours of Pocono that one time. That 2002 race there was crazy. Or the 98 race at Atlanta. We've had some races that seem like they took an entire day. This one was up there. But I've seen gauntlets that were even crazier. Teams leads with 4. Okay, we'll do a couple team questions here and then wrap up for tonight here because this is definitely where we are at 9:38 Pacific time here. So yeah, we are after midnight. I do apologize for those of you guys going to work in the morning. I am definitely another one of them as well. So we'll definitely jump into this at the same time. Alrighty, here we go. Alright, now we're going to go to teams. Hang on. Here we go. First question. Who was owner Butch Mock's partner from 1978 through 1991? Who was owner Butch Mock's partner from 1978 through 1991? That's our first question. To team ownership, who was owner Butch Mock's partner from 1978 through 1991? Would you believe it? I wasn't sure I'd have a whole lot to say on this show tonight. Now here we are. We're still pushing an hour and a half. So there you go. Who was owner Butch Mock's partner from 1978 through 1991? Something Ray. Very close. Alrighty. You and E-Step disagree on race length. Well, I mean, again, there's different perspectives out there, and I think as long as the conversation's happening, just like it is with the broadcast angle, if the conversation's happening, that's good. I don't want to seem like people are reluctant to share their opinions or feel like one's right or the other. I still think longer races make sense. I think if you shorten the races, you're eliminating you're I don't like any changes that reduce the skill that's required. That's why I wasn't crazy about the single lug nut versus the 5 lug nuts. That's why I wasn't crazy about the stage racing. That's why I don't like breaking the 600 into 4 even group 100 lap sprints. No, I think those are things that need to be kind of looked at there. Alrighty. Let's see. Junior Johnson, something right. Wow, this one's actually kind of stumped people here. I didn't think it would. Who is owner Butch Mock's partner from 1978 to 1991? The answer is Bob Rahilly. Bob Rahilly, thus the name Ray Mock Enterprises. Bob Rahilly is the correct answer. Old Oak 32 Assassin, you were close when you said something Ray, but you're very close. Wow, this is interesting phrasing on this question, but I'll go ahead and read it. What oil company sponsored Rob Moroso's successful rookie season? It means successful in terms of actually winning Rookie of the Year. Tragically, of course, he lost his life in a traffic accident in 1990, a DWI accidents there, unfortunately. What oil company sponsored Rob Moroso's successful rookie season? That's how it's phrased in the question. What oil company sponsored Rob Moroso's successful rookie season? Well, make sure I scrolled this down far enough here. Yeah, Ray McLeod. Yeah, you got. There's other guesses that were close for the last one. Valvoline, Crown, Kendall, Castrol. Wow, see, we got a good oil company cross section here. That does that. Yeah. If you're trying to get into it, it does kind of make it harder to picture. What oil company sponsored Rob Moroso's successful rookie season? The answer is indeed Crown Petroleum. Crown Petroleum. Rob Moroso famously called the Crown Prince. Very young driver at the time. He actually kind of looked like Denny Hamlin. I still think when I see some pictures of him, he looks like time-traveling Denny Hamlin with a mullet. But yeah, he's sponsored by Crown Petroleum on the number 20, which was fielded by his father's team. Who paid Neil Bonnet's wages in 1975 with a car to race at Talladega? So our next question here. Who paid Neil Bonnet's wages in 1975 with a car to race at Talladega? Yeah, the thing said successful season. It said successful rookie season. But again, it must be a character limit thing. That's not the word I would have used either, but that's what it says on here. He did get Rookie of the Year, but yeah. Who paid Neil Bonnet's wages in 1975 with a car to race at Talladega? That's our next question. Who paid Neil Bonnet's wages in 1975 with a car to race at Talladega? All right, you got Dale Sr., the Wood Brothers, Junior Johnson, Bud Moore, his parents, and so forth here. All righty. And the answer is Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison. Johnny, you were very close to one of the Allisons. Here you go. Bobby Allison. How about that? I did not know that. That makes sense though. The Alabama gang stays close. But there you are. Bobby Allison, the correct answer. All right, here we go. We'll do one more question for tonight here, and we'll wrap things up here. What teammate, last question for tonight, what teammate did Mark Martin beat out for the 1998 Trans-South 400 pole position? What teammate did Mark Martin beat out for the 1998 Trans-South 400 pole position? Make sure I got this clicked there. Ah, there we go. Alrighty. Last question for the evening. What teammate did Mark Martin beat out for the 1998 Trans-South 400 pole position? Don't look it up, of course. Try to guess it here. All right, let a few more guesses get in. We got Jeff Burton, we got Musgrave, we got Burton, we got Benson, we got Musgrave. We're getting a lot of Roush Racing entries on here. What teammate did Mark Martin beat out for the 1998 Trans-South 400 pole position? We got Musgrave. We got Burton. Alrighty, let's see. Here comes the answer. The answer is indeed Jeff Burton. Jeff Burton is the correct answer. A lot of you got that one there. Jake Umbayashi. It looks like you were the first one there. I apologize if I mispronounced that there. Umibayashi? It's a great name. I like that. Yeah, Jeff Burton is the correct answer. Blake Thiemann, you were right behind him there. So yes, Jeff Burton, the famous Exide Ford back then in 1998. One of the great throwback schemes. So that will do it for our show this evening, folks. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a wonderful Easter evening here. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and enjoyed the racing this evening. I certainly enjoyed talking about the action here this week. And thank you again for your support here on the channel here this week with the new video this week. Hope to have some more new content for you in the near future. So again, the website is lastcar.info. The Patreon is patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at lastcaronbrock for more updates throughout the week. Our next race is going to be the Talladega Super Speedway as we go into the action for the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series. Our next show is going to be after the Cup Series race, about 15 minutes after the checkered flag, and somebody invariably goes below the yellow line, and I'm going to be upset about that, but I will share that with all of you during the show here. So have a great evening, everyone. Have a safe week, and I will see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.